recognize board members for more than 5 years of service. We have 4 board members who are being recognized tonight for their diligence and commitment to service, and that would be board member Caldwell, Orgel, Woods, and Jones. They weren't expecting that. Yes. It takes a lot of time and effort, and we appreciate their commitment to this board and the leadership that they have provided for such a long time. So thank you to Mr. Caldwell, Mr. Orgel, Mr. Woods, and Ms. Jones. Is Robert still out there, our photographer? Let me check. Yes.
Everybody's got a phone with a camera.
Yes.
Yeah, the 4 of us take a picture. We've been hanging together.
I've been serving together for a long time.
It's been 7 years. Stephanie, don't make any faces behind us, okay?
I won't.
Chris lost it already.
We'll now move to the other committee reports. Academic Performance Committee.
Thank you, Chair. We have actually talked about quite a few things in the Academics Performance Committee. Just on last week, we discussed textbooks in the Emerging Leaders Program. I do want to put to the listening public around textbooks in that conversation. We actually sent it back to academics, so it'll be coming back to us in June around the next steps regarding textbooks. My colleagues, you guys had a lot of questions that we really feel need to be answered before we say yes to a textbook investment. Looking forward to extending that conversation. The Emerging Leaders conversation was a really good one because we talked about what we're doing at SCS to make sure that our principals are ready day one, going to leading school buildings, and also what we're doing to support those new principals who've already started their work, so then that way they have what they need in order to be successful. One other thing that we did talk about in a previous academic performance committee meeting was just around the CCTE redesign, and just I'm putting it out there because my colleagues, you guys have been very clear on that you have a lot to say. We will strongly have oversight in what that looks like in a redesign, and I just want to say this to the listening public around, we do ask questions often, and I will say my colleagues really take this very seriously, so we often have conversations around that redesign, and we will have strong oversight as what that looks like as we move forward. So your questions are being heard. That's all I have, Chair. Thank you.
Mr. Caldwell, Audit, Budget, and Finance Committee.
We had an audit budget and finance meeting May 1st. We talked about the 2018-19 budget. We got the look at the third quarter financial statements, which I believe are on for a vote tonight. We talked about the Head Start carryover action plan and also the final presentations for the board member budget committee meetings. And that was it.
Mr. Orgel, Capital Needs and Facilities.
As far as capital needs, and I was going to ask Ms. Phelan, we're going to the county commission on what day to? Tomorrow.
Tomorrow at 8:55.
Make sure that time's right.
Yeah.
AM or PM?
Yeah, it's part of the budget AM, part of the budget presentation. Capital will be part and parcel to that presentation.
And our ask is?
$92 million.
$92 million.
Yep.
So I wanted to encourage all of our board members. Those are capital needs. We hosted in Germantown High School, Mr. McCormick, Mr. Woods, myself, the other day, and we looked at the $471 million of deferred maintenance that we have in our buildings. I'll remind you, I always say I have it underneath here, We have 140 buildings that are 40-plus years old. So if you own a home or live in an apartment or somewhere that's over 40 years old, you know how many problems you have. And we're inhabited by thousands of kids every day when we're in session, and we get a lot of wear and tear in our buildings. So the $92 million is only about 20% of what it would take to bring us up to speed. So it's very important that we all implore our county commissioners to fund it. And the good thing about it is, whatever the formula is that amount of money also, percentage-wise, will go to the municipal districts. And they have similar problems where they've got schools that are older and are in need. So some of the highlights, we're going to add some gymnasiums. We're going to do some more HVAC and roofing repairs. We've got 2 schools, our 21st century schools, which would be Alsea and Goodlet, which are school combinations. We're taking 4 schools down to 2, and we're making them, is it 5 schools down to 2, and making them 21st centuries schools and upgrade. We're not spending a tremendous amount of money. We're just rethinking the way we're going to teach our children in the facilities. And what also, the reason it went up a little bit, and most of y'all were at the committee meeting, was that we're removing portables. Who on this board has portables at their schools? And as we can always point out, they don't have sanitary facilities out there. Children have to walk inside or be escorted, have to be escorted inside to go to the restroom. You've got to walk through the elements to get to class. So we decided that we were going to dispense with portables in certain cases, and we're going to continue that program, but that we're going to build permanent structures, not some modular prefab structures. So, and I've gotten questions from some board members and from some of our principals and administrators about future builds, whether it be for CTE or other growth at schools. And I, as one board member, am not going to be in favor of anything that's modular or portable. I just spoke about schools that were 40 years plus old. We need long-term solutions, and putting portables are not long-term solutions at our schools. We need to be forward-thinking and solve those problems. So I'm going to resist any attempt as a board member to add any portables anywhere, or any modular and not permanent, and that serves the needs of our students and does not create a second class of student that lives outside of the building. So anyway, that was the report. If there are any questions, and good luck to our, oh, you have a question? Usually the board members ask questions.
I'm sorry, I wanted to clarify. I had said 92 million, it's 90.2 million, so I just wanted to clarify that.
Well, is everybody okay with the 92, or do we want to just go back to the 90.2?
I didn't want to leave a bad number out
We'll
there,
be
sorry.
accurate, it's the 90.2.
Yeah.
And I do just want to remind board members that Lynn Johnson, the superintendent, and I will be presenting to the county commission for our budget presentation in the morning. We're encouraging all board members to come, support, invite your constituents, those that you have on your group text that actually call to complain or give you kudos. Make sure that they're out tomorrow at our county commission meeting. We will be making our presentation, and as Mr. Orgel has mentioned, we do have a pretty substantial capital ask that we want to make sure that for those schools, I think Ms. Jones and I both have schools who need new gymnasiums, those K-8 schools that they're advocating, that we ask people to come out and support the budget ask that we have for the county, before the county commission in the morning. And now we'll move on to Community Outreach and Engagement Committee. I missed Mr. Caldwell, and then I'll get to you, Mr. Orgel.
I was just going to remind Board Member Orgel that I think part of the discussion about the deferred maintenance also was greatly affected by the 5 years or so that we received no capital improvement funds by the county commission, and then accelerated, and that's one major reason it's up to almost $500 million.
Mr. Cornell.
It's just a general question. What provisions do we have to demonstrate to us that the repairs and construction will be done in the most energy efficient manner and, in a sense, will save us money? And how do we tally that? And I had
Ms.
asked
Phelan?
Attorney Urban a couple months ago about the contracts and to what extent energy efficiency is in certain contracts, but we'll get back to that later. But because we could save millions, how do we know what we're doing and how we're doing it?
I think that, Board Member Cornell, I think in the last ad hoc meeting, we talked a little bit about one of the energy ideas that's been brought to the board. And in that meeting, I was describing that, you know, our intent really is to go through an energy, formal energy program and issue some kind of procurement activity to determine how and in what way can we address energy needs across the district. And what I was asking for in that ad hoc discussion was a little bit of time to get through our construction capital program. And then I wanted to focus a little bit on, you know, reducing the backlog of work orders. And then our team can shift and start to focus on, if we're going to do a meaningful energy program, I want to be thoughtful about it, and I want to go through the right procurement to get us what we need.
Oh, I certainly understand that. But are we looking at spending $90 million without considering energy efficiency?
No.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Ms. Love?
So last week I asked about any facility requests that were over 4 years old. Can you send that to me tonight? Thank you.
Mr. Woods?
Madam Chair, I guess this would be for Mr. Orgel as well, but athletic facilities, we consistently get requests wanting to get information on are there plans for updating fields, particularly athletic fields, as a part of our capital ask this year, or anything on the list related to the athletic needs of many of our schools?
We don't have anything specific to the fields. We do have additions and also gyms. And so we are trying to provide gymnasiums for K-8 who have middle school athletic programs that don't have a gym, and then 3 other gyms for the schools that have additions going on, and then additions for schools that are over capacity.
Superintendent, this is a question that that I guess we can get an answer to later, but I remember when we at first came on the board, particularly the 5-year board members, we recall there being rotated.
More than 5.
More than 5. We recall a rotating list in which there were new turf fields being added, and that was short-lived. So I don't know if it was because of budget constraints, or we decided that it wasn't, you know, a good use of resources, or perhaps those fields aren't, you know, just as much to maintain as the grass fields. But I'm just curious if that's part of your plan to look at turf fields, particularly for football, soccer, and other sports.
I think that, you know, yes. And I think that what we need to work through is turf fields aren't considered capital, so we have to figure out another way to fund them. But yes, you know, it's in our plan to start talking about those things.
All right, we'll help remind you. Thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Okay, seeing no other lights, we're going to move on to community outreach and engagement.
Thank you, Chair. We did not have a meeting, but I do want board members to be on the lookout for a meeting invite to discuss our community, family and community engagement department. Thank you.
Evaluation committee report. Internal board operations committee.
Thank you, Chair. We did have a meeting, and in the meeting we discussed the SCS employee handbook, and as you know, that's a conversation we've been talking about for quite some time, and we're hoping to have a draft by within the next 3 to 4 months. I'm pushing on that. I know as I look at Chief Small around that, but it's our goal to have that as soon as possible, so that way we can be able to move forward with being prepared for new employees coming in. The other topic is board policies that we discussed for student wellness and fund balance, and I know you guys have received something via email around fund balance. So we need to be able to move forward with that conversation after we come to a consensus of what that should look like. Grading policy, we're still talking about that. And when I mentioned grading policy, the superintendent and academics brought something to us about 3 to 4 months ago, and we're still trying to figure out the particulars about that so that before we bring it to everyone as a whole. Thank you.
Legislative and Advocacy Committee.
Yes, just quickly, we're still working with our lobbyists to establish a date and time in which we can get a debrief of this past legislative session. My colleague, Board Member Love, and I are looking at still a deadline, a suggested deadline in which we want to get our legislative request in for this year. We are scheduling a meeting probably first or second week of July. No summers are, real. I looked at the Board Member Jones as soon as I mentioned that. We'll likely plan that meeting around the same date as a board meeting in order to try to get a book in around the same time. So we're not trying to add anything extra to your schedule, but just wanted to have a debrief for the board members. So again, July 9th is a date, that arbitrary one at that, in which we could start sending in some suggestions as far as what we want to see on the legislative agenda for this coming session. That concludes my report.
You want to speak as a co-chair before I go ahead?
So what Board Member Woods was stating, as a gentle reminder, board members, we need your legislative agenda or items in by July 9th, so that when it's time for our meeting, we'll already have ideas or suggestions that you have, so the meeting can be productive, right, Chair? I think that's right. Yes, okay. So by July 9th.
And will the board office maybe just send us a reminder? Let's just set a calendar reminder. If you could send one out 2 weeks and then do another prodding a week before, because it usually takes a few prods for board members to get their things in, myself being guilty. Ms. Jones?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just wanted to let Board Member Woods know that my facial expression was that I'm happy to see we moved the date to July. It's amazing what can happen when you have a co-chair.
And that's the truth. Seeing no other lights for legislative advocacy, we'll move on to procurement.
We did have a procurement committee meeting on May 10th. We had 4 items. The first one was an update on information technology. Mr. Williams, I think, blew us off, but no, he had a last minute a meeting and he couldn't attend. He did send a written report, and I think we'll look forward to another update sometime this summer, maybe July or August. Okay. The second item we had was a Apex renewal that is, I think, currently being negotiated either by legal or Ms. Phelan, I'm not sure, but there were a number of questions about that. I think in the end they couldn't give us a lot of detail because it is up for renewal, but I did ask that one request was that no one really knew what was in the original contract, and so I did ask that that original contract that is the subject of the renewal be sent out so board members who wanted to read what we already what the expiring contract has in it. So I don't know if that's been done, but we do need to send that out so those who wanted to read the expiring contract could. That was the request. So if board staff will make sure that we do get a copy of that expiring contract. Substitute teachers generate a lot of concern, questions, requests for data from board members. I think the staff that were present know what the board was asking for in terms of what the substitute services department might look like if we had it a different or more aggressive staff complement. There were some issues around what services could we provide, what services could be provided through this RFP process. I think board members generally wanted more information, had a lot of questions, which I look forward to the answer to at our next presentation for that. And the last was a human resources item on our long-term, short-term disability, and I think we're on track for that in June. Is that right? And that's my report.
Thank you so much, Ms. Jones. You are really moving procurement forward. Appreciate that. Superin- Superintendent Hobson, your report, please.
Just very briefly, Madam Chair, so just reiterating what Chair said, we will be doing our presentation tomorrow. You guys, board members, did such a great job that we really are using that presentation as a basis for what we will lay out to the commission. I've met with several commissioners one-on-one, and people seem to be generally supportive. I think, as Mr. Orgel said, I think the big discussion most likely will be around capital. You guys recall that last year when they approved the 2 new bills, they asked us just to go ahead and spend that money this year because we weren't going to be able to spend all the money on the building of the school last year because of where it was, and they said go ahead and spend it on these other things, as HVAC and others, these things, and then come back next year and we'll approve the money for the new bill. So it's that, it's a lot of maintenance, and it's those additions. So I hope you guys will be there, and we will send out, I guess, the final copy of the presentation just in case the board wants to see it, but it's going to be remarkably similar to the presentation that you all made in the community, which we've gotten great feedback on. And then finally, just want to remind the board, invite the board, you know, every year we do our Teachers Rock event. So this year we decided to do it just all employees. It's going to be out at Shelby Farm. It's going to be from 10 to 4. A lot of activities planned. I think I'm going to be at the dunk tank from 11:30 to 12. And a lot of other folks will be out there, so look forward to that.
And what date is the?
It's Saturday from 10 to 4 out at Shelby Farms.
Okay. General Counsel's report.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Chair Avant and members of the board, the process I'm about to present to the board is commonly referred to as due process. It's the first step in the process that affords certificated employees statutory rights and protections under the Teacher Tenure Act. Tennessee Code Annotated Section 49.5.511 provides, among other things, that when charges are made to the Board of Education against a teacher, charging the teacher with offenses that would justify dismissal of the teacher, the charges shall be made in writing, specifically stating the offenses that are charged, and shall be signed by the party or parties making the charges. It goes on to say, if in the opinion of the board charges are of such a nature as to warrant the dismissal of the teacher, the director of schools shall give the teacher a written notice of this decision, together with a copy of the charges and a copy of the form, which shall be provided by the Commissioner of Education, advising the teacher as to the teacher's legal duties and recourse. Tennessee Code Annotated Section 49.5.512 provides that a teacher tenure who receives notification of charges pursuant to the statute I just cited may, within 30 days after receipt of the notice, demand a full and complete hearing on the charges before an impartial hearing officer. I will summarize the charge letter requested by the Director of Schools, and after summarizing that letter, I will inquire as to whether there is a motion to authorize the issuance of the charges to the employee. These written charges are directed to Legina Scott. A description of the charges are as follows. They include neglect of duty as defined in TCA 49.5.501, subsection 8, insubordination as defined in TCA section 49.5-501, subsection 7, and conduct unbecoming to a member of the teaching profession, unprofessional conduct as defined in TCA section 49.5.501, subsection 3. Just to give you an explanation of the actions, and they should be in board docs. Under Tennessee Code Annotated 49.6.303B, school counselors have a duty to provide preventive and developmental counseling to school students in order to prepare them for their school responsibilities. Under Tennessee Comprehensive Rules and Regulations 0520-02-02-.26, the school counselor is also responsible for, among other things, counseling students in educational planning and placement, and counseling students about transition from grade level to grade level. Ms. Scott is a professional school counselor at Southwind High School for the senior class. Her essential job functions include, among other things, counseling students in setting and developing strategies for the achievement of academic goals, preparing and submitting required reports and records, participating with school leadership in the coordination of course selection and student scheduling, and conducting data analyses, also known is audit reviews of transcripts, attendance, detention, and failure rates, and other factors to help determine guidance counseling needs to the school. These duties and responsibilities are meant to ensure that seniors are not placed in jeopardy of failing to graduate on time. During the 2017 school year, Ms. Scott was repeatedly asked and given deadlines by school leadership to perform data analyses, i.e. audit reviews of seniors' transcripts, provide weekly reports on the number of seniors on track for graduation and those needing additional credits to meet graduation requirements, and conduct one-on-one graduation counseling sessions with each senior by the end of the fall semester. However, Ms. Scott failed to perform these tasks by the set deadlines. For instance, from October to November 2017, she was provided one-on-one and group training on how to perform an audit review of students' transcripts and given a deadline of November 13th to complete the audit. However, by December 2017, Ms. Scott had failed to complete the audit. Ms. Scott also failed to provide timely and accurate weekly reports regarding the graduation status of seniors and hold one-on-one graduation counseling sessions with each senior as was requested by school leadership. School leadership subsequently gave Ms. Scott a second deadline of January 16, 2018, by which to complete the audit of the transcripts and hold one-on-one graduation counseling sessions. Ms. Scott failed to meet those deadlines. By February 2018, Ms. Scott continued in her failure to complete the audit of seniors' transcripts and conduct the one-on-one graduation counseling sessions with each senior. As a result, school leaders and the other school guidance counselors moved immediately to audit seniors' transcripts in order to identify which seniors were not on track to graduate, as well as to quickly determine what immediate remedial actions were needed for those seniors not on track. Ms. Scott was not a participant in this process. During the 2017-2018 school year, Ms. Scott has been referred to and counseled by the Office of Labor and Employee Relations twice for failing to perform her duties, which are noted in the notice of charges. In December 2016, the Office of Labor and Employee Relations also gave Ms. Scott a documented counseling for inappropriate and unprofessional actions toward a parent. Ms. Scott grossly failed to perform the duties outlined under state law, the State Board of Education, and her job description. This is evidenced by Ms. Scott's repeated failures to perform duties and responsibilities that reasonably can be expected of one serving in the capacities of an educator and a high school guidance counselor. This is further evidenced by Ms. Scott's repeated refusal or failure to carry out specific assignments, and Ms. Scott's failure to effectively perform her duties as a high school professional school counselor. Based on the foregoing charges, individually and or collectively, it is the recommendation of the Director of Schools that Ms. Legina Scott be dismissed from Shelby County Schools. At this point, I'll ask if we're authorized to move to issue these charges in accordance with the tenure law.
Is there a motion? Is there a motion?
So moved.
A second.
Seconds, Jones. Ms. Love, you have a question?
For clarity, this is just to begin the process, not saying that we agree or disagree. This is just begins the process.
That is correct.
Seeing no other questions, can I get a roll call vote?
Board Member Caldwell.
Aye.
Board Member Orville.
Aye.
Board Member Woods.
Aye.
Board Member Love.
Aye.
Board Member McCormick. Board Member Jones.
Aye.
Board Member Bibbs. Board Member Cornell.
Aye.
Board Chair Avant.
Aye.
You have 9 ayes.
That motion passes to move forward with dismissal. We'll now move to, if there's no unfinished business, we'll move on to new board business, which is proposed policy revisions, first reading.
Chair Avant, Superintendent Hobson, and board members, you have before you tonight two policies.
Can you speak into the microphone a little bit?
You have before you, can you hear me? You have before you tonight two policies for first reading. The first policy is policy number 3007, student wellness. The proposed revisions to the policy strikes the current policy in its entirety and replaces it with language based on the federal guidelines established by the USDA for promotion and education of nutrition and physical activity. The second policy, policy number 2014, fund balance, it strikes the current policy in its entirety and replaces it with two primary revisions. The first is to authorize the superintendent or his designee to identify intended uses of assigned fund balances. And the second major revision to the policy establishes 8 to 15% as the target range for the district's unassigned general fund balance. As indicated in our IBO meeting, the board recommended moving the policies forward to the board on tonight with additional conversation around the base level for the general fund balance, for the unassigned general fund balance.
Board members, there's no action that needs to be taken at this time, but are there any questions? Mr. Caldwell?
So I would just ask that when we have the discussion, I'm assuming that's going to be before the final vote. Is that correct? Since this is just the first reading?
Huh?
Okay. So currently we have a policy that says 3%. And so we're going to move, this policy recommends that we do 8 to 15%. If you look at the page in the budget book that talks about the different levels, it says that 1 to 4% is the lowest, and then adequate is from 4% to 8%. I think that there's no reason to set a limit of 8% because of the, then we'll have to take a certain action to suspend the policy. I know that it's been said that that's a Standard & Poor's rating. We don't issue bonds. We don't need to worry about a Standard & Poor's rating. If we were a well-funded district and a high-performing district, maybe those targets would be appropriate, but I think that we need the flexibility when we have things that can help the kids that are currently in our district, that we use fund balance judiciously around things that may be a one-year or a one-time investment, or those kind of investments like we've seen in some of these, in some of our current budget asks, that either they're one-time requests or they are leveraging the current assets in the district.
Ms. Love?
Thank you. My question is geared towards the wellness policy. I know in here it states that the children will have 15 minutes of outside time or physical activity. Superintendent, I know that we're not voting on the policy, but I do want to make sure that the staff is, I guess, working with the principals once this policy is approved, how it will work, because 15 minutes, it's going to take about 15 minutes to get them outside. And I know what I've heard from several principals is we don't have time because of what they're required to do as it relates to academics. So I don't know how we're going to be innovative to incorporate physical activity with science or math or reading, or how we're going to do that. And also with where it says that the schools, they will be provided the equipment. So is that included in our budget? The physical activity equipment, is that included in our budget?
I'm sorry, Board Member Love. I'm having just a little trouble hearing. So could you repeat the last question?
It says that our schools will be provided with physical education equipment. So have we taken an inventory of the schools to see who needs what, and is this included in our budget?
Yeah, so I can answer part of this, but I'll also just let Chief Phelan answer the second half of it. So we did, as part of technology requests last year, we did a needs assessment for each school where we identified what computers were needed. We were able to kind of use some Title I funding to support that need. In terms of the inventory side, I'll let
Yeah,
Chief Bailey.
we may not have the answer today, but that's just something I think we need to look at. If the district is gonna provide the equipment, whatever that equipment is, I don't know.
So it sounds like Ms. Love's trying to make sure that we've asked the schools to define what equipment they need in some category related to the materials she's looking at, more than an inventory in question. Is that
So
right,
yes,
Ms. Love?
the answer to that is yes.
Okay.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Cornell?
Similar to Board Member Love's concern, I'm wondering how is it going to be implemented and verified that the principals are following state law? I know we had a problem earlier with some drills. Not a great problem, just a little problem where some drills weren't being done as to follow the state law. But do we have a certification process where a principal has to certify, or could we have one where the principal certifies he or she did follow the law?
Yes, and I'll ask Dr. Whitelaw to comment, but I think you're right, Ms. Kerner. That's exactly what happened with the drills. We built in the compliance piece where people had to certify they were doing it. I'm assuming Dr. Whitelaw will be something similar, because I think the issue is a policy, but I think it's state law now.
Yes, and definitely we're asking principals to create a schedule, and with their schedule, we'll be checking for compliance to make sure that they're adhering to the policy.
And Board Member Love talked about 15 minutes outside when it takes longer than to get them. I mean, they might go outside and turn around and have to come back in. So could y'all consider outside means outside, getting outside is not
Time for
outside.
line up, then go outside. We definitely will take that into account. And also, we will be having monthly reports just to make sure that our schools are adhering to the policy as well.
Okay. And I'm going to say that I support the law. Parents support the law. I think that's why they passed it. We all know that increasing oxygen to the brain increases learning. That may be a great surprise in year 2018, but I think human beings have known that for centuries. And not only that, sunshine and vitamin D is good, and also sunshine reduces nearsightedness. The kids in Japan have been inside so much, everybody's wearing glasses now. I don't want to be as nearsighted as I am. They need to get out there and, in the sunshine. So, thank you.
Ms. Love? Second
Doc,
time.
yes, ma'am. Dr. Whitelaw, as you stated, with making sure that the principals adhere to the law, I think we need to, well, this is what I know, that our teachers are giving things that they must do every day. So I think it needs to be a relationship between the administration and the schools to make sure that they're still doing what they're supposed to do based on what they're given, but also that time is provided. Because like I stated, I've spoken to numerous of principals who say they don't have time. And I know that this is state law. So I just want to make sure that the administration is working with the schools. And like I said, we can come up with an innovative way. We provide the recess, but include other subjects in the recess.
Thank you, and we would definitely be sharing that with our instructional leadership directors. Thank you.
Mr. Cornell, your second time speaking.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I think one legal issue, just to let you know I'm getting ready to talk about legal. One legal issue that I've often wondered about is this. If there is a requirement under state law to do something, and the teacher is a licensed professional, to what extent can a principal tell a licensed professional to not comply with state law? For example, we have heard teachers say, the principal won't let us. I contend that as a licensed professional, regardless of what the principal says, the teacher must follow state law also. And so the question is, are we allowing principals to invalidate state law and tell another group of licensed professionals they don't have to comply with it? That's what I've heard. So not only is the principal not complying with state law, the principal is directing someone to violate state law, which is an even greater offense. So I just want to raise that issue. There's a point at which teachers need to be allowed to teach, fulfill their professional responsibility, and be managed. But we don't need principals saying, stay inside, the test is in 2 weeks. We don't have time for it. Because at that point, the principal is asking the teacher, in my opinion, to violate the law. The law says you take the kids and you take them outside. Then if we let the principal do that and we tell the teacher that he or she must comply with the principal, and that's what the principals are doing, then we're breaking the law. So I think we need to, again, I am happy with the answer, okay, but I just think there's a legal relationship between a professional called a teacher and a principal, and we've got to be cognizant of that, because it may come up at another time.
I agree, Mr. Cornell, and at the end of the day, the law is a law, so nobody's authorized to direct somebody to break the law. So I guess a couple things. We need to make sure, from a compliance standpoint, people aren't just checking the box, we're actually doing it. I think, Mr. Cornell, to the extent there are complaints about that happening, if you can just share them with us, either offline or whatever, and we can, raise it with the specifics with the specific schools.
And Superintendent, we also want to point out physical activity. So we'll be working with our principal to make sure students are exposed to physical activity, as well as going outside, because there may be some days that they stay inside to do physical activity for 15 minutes. So we wanted to make sure we clarified that point.
Seeing no other lights, I just wanted to commend our Chief Financial Officer for bringing forth the policy. I know that this has been a large debate amongst board members, and I do completely support us having a threshold of the 8 to 10%. But I appreciate the administration taking some leadership to know that we need something in policy so that with each budget season, it isn't a different decision that's made, but it is a policy that this board is following. Thank you. We'll now move to the approval of the consent agenda. I need a motion, please. Is that a motion, Mr. Orgel? Oh, a motion for approval of the consent. We have to make a motion first. Do I have a second? Second, Ms. Love. And now, if there are questions or there's items to be removed, we can discuss.
I just wanted to remove for a moment the board allocations item, and I'm looking for the number.
Mr. Org, we've already,
No, I had to,
the strategic school funds allocation?
yeah, but it was on the consent agenda.
It was moved to
Oh, you
action
moved it when
item.
I asked earlier? Oh, I thought I had to wait.
It had already been,
Okay,
the
my bad.
strategic funds allocation.
Thank you.
So, are there any other items? Ms. Love?
11.5.
Mr. Cornell? The security equipment? I think that one is already on. That's been already moved to action item. Mr. Woods? Mr. Organ wanted you to remove an item. Any other items? Okay, and Superintendent, we did remove do we need to remove the Central Nutrition Center demolition or no?
No, I don't think we need to remove that one.
So that will stay on consent? Yes. Mr. Cornell, no other items? Okay. I'm going to read the items and dollar amount for the record. Let's see, 11.2, Eureka Math Curriculum, Printing Materials, $432,471.60. 11.3, Power School Group, Annual Management, the amount of $719,463. 11.4 Palo Alto Security Firewall in the amount of $107,200. 11.6 teacher tenure. 11 point, there's a budget amount to that. Is that correct? Okay. 11.7 contract amendment, increased contract for CBiz Valuation Group, $51,975. 11.8 complete serving lines for various school cafeterias, the amount of $232,181.10. 11.9 contract amendment Thompson Engineering Design in the amount of $90,000. 11.10 direct for manufacturer food bid in the amount of $4,283,996.45. 11.11 roof replacement Riverview K8. Rescind for 11.11, is that correct? Okay, and 11.12 roof replacement Riverview K8 award in the amount of $669,060. 11.13 Central Nutrition demolition project in the amount of $741,390.60. 11.4 Fisher and Arnold Bear Building amount of $174,003. 11.15 May 18th budget amendment. 11.16 third quarter FY 2018 financial statements. 11.17 resolution approving the sale of prudential stock held by Shelby County School Board of Education. 11.18 resolution approving the acceptance of Archer Daniels Midland common stock donation. 11.19 resolution approving the sale of Archer Daniels Midland common stock. 11.21 board meeting schedule. If there are no other questions, can we get a roll call vote for the approval of the consent agenda? You had a question, Ms. Jones?
It's
Was the resolution added at the end? or not?
it's on the request for action.
Got them covered in both places.
So it is at the end?
Can, maybe I,
Is the resolution at the end? Okay. Okay.
Get it covered there.
Ms. Anthony?
Okay. Board Member Caldwell.
aye.
Board Member Orgel.
Aye.
Board Member Woods.
Aye.
Board Member Love.
Aye.
Board Member McCormick. Board Member Jones. Board Member Bibbs. Board Member Cornell.
Aye.
Board Chair Avant.
Aye.
You have 9 ayes.
The consent agenda is approved. Okay, we're gonna move on to 12.1 camera service license card access, the amount of $815,837. Can I get a motion? So we can discuss. Can I get a motion?
So moved.
Ms. Jones? A second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Cornell. Mr. Cornell, you had questions about this item? No, I have a question, but if you do,
I'm wondering to what extent, is this the first allotment for purchases? And what do you see as the total need?
Carolyn.
This is the first phase, Commissioner, on upgrading our cameras. If you all can remember, during our April board meeting, we had a student that came up and expressed some concerns after the shooting about some of our larger school campuses with multiple buildings that we couldn't secure. This proposal and this approval will secure those buildings with the technology that we've gone out and researched and discovered. The technology will allow the doors to open during class change and close and lock after 5 or 7 minutes, whatever we designate for that time period, to secure those buildings instead of them being open like they are. The cameras is a phase 1. We will be coming back next month with phase 2. We've identified approximately 35 schools that have no cameras at all, and we want to get cameras in all of our school systems.
And so, as we see in businesses, when you walk in, there's a monitor and it shows different parts of a site of that business or whatever. Will y'all have that monitored, or?
We will. The second phase is upgrading the system so that the school district can have what we consider comparable to a real-time crime center. We will have monitors that will monitor those cameras.
Point of order, Madam Chair. Sorry to interrupt, but it's my recollection that the state passed a law within the last year to allow this information to be privy to executive session. While I agree with my colleague that these are very important questions, they're also very sensitive to the security of our schools. Mentioning publicly the number of schools that lack cameras and things of that nature, while I appreciate that information, I would yield to our general counsel whether or not this would be information that could be shared with the board member later.
Madam Chair, I'll withdraw my question.
Thank you. I have a different question. There were 3 MWBEs that bid on this contract. Were any of those selected as vendors? Okay.
I think while they're checking on that, Mr. Cornell, to your point, we mentioned last week that the whole district and all schools throughout the state are going through this kind of needs assessment in furtherance of the money that the governor put aside for security. So we know that, we still have more needs, but we anticipate from what we're doing and from what the state, provides us that we should be able to adequately address the needs.
Which one? And I just like, you can just send it to me. I'd like to see the bid sheet for how these particular vendors were selected. And what is the division of the award? It's $815,000. What is the division of the award to the vendors? We'll come back to it. I'd like an answer to my question, if that's okay with other board members.
What's the breakdown of the $800,000+ for the minority vendor?
Okay, so my request to board members is that we come back, because I would like to know an answer to that question. Ms. Bibbs?
Thank you, Chair. So my question is a little different. Well, probably on the same lines, I think, because it's not included in here. How did they make the selection of the 3 that they decided on? I think there are 8 total that answered the RFP, but I want to know, how did they score? each one was scored, because in order for you to select those 3 that you selected, I just want to know how did they stand out in comparison to the other 5.
So while they're gathering that information, if we could go on, we'll come back for a vote on this one. 12.2, proposed budget approval. I need to get a motion. Mr. McCormick, second by Ms. Bibbs. The dollar amount is $1,054,423,509. I'm not sure if there were some additional questions on the proposed budget that called for us to put it on request for action from last week's meeting.
Motion to approve the budget.
We've gotten that. We got that part done. Mr. Caldwell?
So there were a couple of things we discussed last week, and one of them was after we went to a presentation for acquiring new science textbooks for the first time since 2009, and that was $6.7 million. And my suggestion was that we add it to the science add it to the ask. I have some other questions in terms of how the budget is presented, in that, you know, we were at I believe a $53 million deficit. I mean, and we were going to use $40 million of fund balance, and then there was going to be a 12.67 ask, and so when we added that $7 million, we were up to $20 million, and so that's not in here, is it? I'm just asking so we know that we get to whatever we want in the budget up to that amount.
So it's the textbooks are not included as part of the general fund budget. Now we do have a alternative budget resolution, and where we have it right now where we show the budget books as part of the funding request, and that would make the funding request, instead of being 12.7, it would be approximately over $18 million.
And I think our intent, Mr. Carver, because we heard a lot from a lot of board members over the last week, so, you know, we want to present whatever the board wants to present. And so I think that whatever the board comes up with, we could just change the resolution to add or subtract from the 12.7 that's in the current one now.
Okay, then my next question, does it include the 5.7 million that we have on these investments for CTE?
Yes.
Okay. So and does that include some modules that look, that the way I would describe them is the description that from reading the information is, it probably looks like a trailer for a tractor, that a truck pulls behind it, and then we're going to retrofit it and put, it's a metal building that's 60 by 100, and then we're going to retrofit it and put electricity and all that in there?
So I'll let the academic team speak towards the details, but what I can say is that it does include additional labs or renovations of those labs, but I'll let Dr. Brown speak.
And I want to be clear too on that too, Mr. Caldwell. I think that, you know, obviously before we, you know, would endeavor to spend these funds, we'd have to bring it back to the board because they're all over $100,000. I think that there were 4 labs proposed initially. Since that time, you know, we've been dealing with this for a long time. We've actually sat down with all the principals. I think White Station wanted to go a lot slower and focus on dual enrollment as opposed to the CTE, and we did not disagree with that given, you know, their performance. I think that the Whitehaven principal really wanted this, the Overton principal really wanted this, and there was one more for Melrose, and I think we were trying to figure out if there was an alternative spot in the building that we could use where we would not have to build. All the rest of them are all laid out. It's just really just painting and cleaning up all the labs that are there now. So to the extent that we don't, well, to the extent we bring any of these for board approval, we still have to go through that process, but this was just a part of the initial plan. As what I want to address too, because I heard from the public, I think that all in there were 51 total new classes and 54 classes that were eliminated. I think the one that comes up the most is cosmetology. So I think we have 14 cosmetology classes. We are dropping it down, I think, by 3, but all of those ones that are dropped are in schools where they have multiple cosmetology classes, and the principal asked so that there could be more course offerings to exchange their cosmetology class with different kinds of course offerings. Again, we've been true to what we said. This is a kind of the step up, ramp up year. I think there were somewhere around 40 teachers or so that were going to be displaced, but many of those folks had business certificates, so I think we're now down to about 12 or 13 teachers. All those teachers will be treated as teachers on assignment next year, so they won't lose any of their they'll still be employed throughout the next year. I know we've had a lot of meetings with teachers, a lot of meetings with schools. Per the board's directive, we've sent out letters to family members. We'll be having a career CTE fair with families in late June. Just wanted to note all that, but just specifically, I think there are some questions about, I mean, regardless of whether it's approved or not, we can't go out and build a lab without bringing it back to the board. And our plan was to bring 2 of them back because they were requested by the principal. They had a high number of students there, and we were going to bring those back in June.
Okay, and then I'll just give my general reservations about this altogether. I think it started off on the wrong foot. I think we're going to be trying to dig out of a hole to get people back and engaged in it. I'm assuming this plan has been approved by the state, and I got questions like, are we offering teachers recertification to other positions? The demand, I really question that we're building. We're accounting on demand that my understanding is we used a test from the Maxine Smith STEM Academy that it is more like an aptitude or proclivity test, and that we're assuming now because these people have exhibited things in those areas that they're going to want to enroll in the classes. The other thing is that I understand there's a component about middle school that we are actually funding, rather than what's being done by the Perkins, that Perkins is not paying for. And so I have not seen a presentation that went from start to finish that really tied all this together. And other board members may not have the same reservations, but I have serious reservations about the success of this. But that's my opinion.
Respectfully, Ms. Caldwell, I disagree that it got off on the wrong foot. I think that the board asked us to redesign it. We worked with one of the best consultants in the country. They laid it all out. I think we probably had 12 meetings on this. It is actually, I know it's a lot of dense reading and we can't expect people to read through all that, but it really is, the plan is really a solid plan. I think that the board, rightfully so, pushed us around making sure we communicate right with teachers, make sure we communicate right with families. I know that has been done. I know the board's pushed around, not moving too fast. So, I mean, I personally got involved. We slowed things down because the whole intent is to say we have a program right now that's not producing any evidence that people are career ready on whole. And so it wasn't like we just pulled out these areas out of our hats. We met with people from the industry throughout Memphis and Shelby County a year and a half ago, looked at the data and try to align what we were doing to where the jobs are. And I think most importantly, we are not making a rash decision or a quick decision. There's not a whole lot that's going to be changed next year other than these these new classes that are substituting out for some of these classes that for the most part just don't have enrollment. I think that the more telling scenario is what it looks like, not 18-19, but 19-20, where you'll have, I think the goal is to have 50% of our kids enrolled in a true pathway that's going to lead to some certification. So, willing to answer whatever questions. But I also say, too, that, you know, we think this is the right thing to do, but if, you know, it's the board's will to slow it down or not do it, then just give us that directive, we'll do it.
Ms. Jones?
Thank you, Madam Chair. My, I guess, question was about the purchase of the science books. I think that was the first thing Mr. Caldwell talked about, and I know last week I expressed that it would be my desire to see that added to the 12. But the other items, you know, I think that we were probably a little late on some of those. Not that they weren't worthy, but I did think that we were going to add the science book purchase. It was represented that that would be a relatively easy thing to do with the resolution. But other than that, I'm comfortable with the budget proposal.
Mr. Woods?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I agree with Board Member Jones that we have made community presentations. There's been a great deal of work that's gone into the preparing of this budget. While I also agree with Mr. Caldwell that we should be spending down dollars to help move the needle as fast as possible to increase academic performance, I also have often indicated that short of a plan to implement those strategies, I don't believe in just spending money just because we have it. In that same vein, Superintendent, I also think that we're challenged in our presentation to the County Commission when in one hand you're showing a budget reserve of $80+ million, and yet we're looking at policy to increase that number 8 to 12%. So on one side we're debating on whether or not we should spend down the dollars we have to 3%, 4.5%, but at the same time we're saying next month let's go to the county and ask for $6 million knowing that you have it. I gave Superintendent Hobson the example that I gave my daughter when she got $500 for Christmas in her savings. She couldn't ask me to buy dinner the next week because you have the money. It's really a hard sell when you just showed me your bank account. And so so Mr. Superintendent, to you and Mr. Johnson, I ask you, I guess in Board Chair Avon as well, how do you make the case for that additional $6 million when you're showing $80 million in savings?
Yeah. So I would say to the board and board members we are spending down our reserves. We're expected to spend down our reserves by $20 million. So we currently have $88 million. We're expecting to come somewhere close to about $67 million at the end of this year. A lot of the expenditures are reoccurring, so about 80% of the investments that we have are reoccurring. I think part of the fund balance policy is to say we need to sustain the decisions that the board and everyone has made in terms of our financial sustainability. And we see the ask from the county as kind of a contribution to that sustainability, but two, really backing the academic program. Currently, we're at 2%. We have 2% of professional certificates. When we think about our Destination 2025 goals, like that's a huge driver as we think about post-secondary opportunity, and it's an opportunity that we have not driven or pushed as hard as we could as a district, and there's a lot of opportunities to give students an opportunity beyond college for success afterwards.
Madam Chair, as savings that we recognize from not filling positions, vacancies over the year.
Yep.
When do we reflect that in the budget? Is it, you true it up monthly, or is it at the end of the year?
So we do it. We actually do it for the first 3 months. We do not take into account any vacancy savings, but after the first quarter, when we have a better idea of our projections, we're revising our forecast continuously, and we're bringing back amendments in terms of how to use vacancy savings. So we've been able to use vacancy savings for the EL purchase of textbooks, including security cameras, and in a lot of ways. So right now we're currently down to about $2 million in vacancy savings by the end of the year because we've been aggressively managing it through the year. For this budget, we're assuming about $30 million of vacancy savings for the FY 18-19 budget, which is about 5% roughly. That's pretty much standard across other school districts, so I'm not alarmed by that. So that's also how we're taking into vacancy savings.
Thank you.
Mr. Cornell.
One question is, and one inquiry, but the raise for teachers is in this tonight.
That's right. So there's $10.5 million for teachers.
Okay. And sometimes, we've talked about this, sometimes we mention 1.34 billion and then
Yes.
there'll be something else and then there'll be a
Yes.
reserve. But there are 2 or 3 parts that get us to 1.4.
Yes.
Now, the operating budget is one thing, and then the total budget is around 1.4.
No, it's a great question. So, so you can think about our budget. I think about our budget. We have various funds for our budget. So we have a main operating fund, which is called our general fund. We have a federal fund, which is another pool of money, which is Title I, IDEA, other funds. We have special revenue, which typically is philanthropic funds that we get. And then we have capital and nutrition service. When you add all of those funds, and we have an internal service fund as well. When you add all of those funds together, that's the 1.4, and I'm rounding, the $1.4 billion. When you just focus on our main operating fund, which is just the general fund, which makes up the bulk of our revenues, of our budget, that's about $1.05 billion. And that's the fund in terms of the request would go to in terms of the 12.7 million.
And so when we look at, let's say, holding back a certain amount for a rainy day or whatever we're supposed to hold back, let's say 5%, is that 5% of the billion, or is that, would that be, so that would be 58, 60, 70, 80 million of the billion?
It's a great question.
Is
So
that
it's
in the
five.
operating?
So there's a state requirement for 3%, and it's 3% of your main operating fund, so your general fund, not the 1.4 billion of just the $1 billion. That would be the requirement.
Mr. Caldwell, this is your second time speaking.
Thank you. I would just like to separate 2 pieces of the discussion. And I do want to applaud the superintendent and Lynn. I looked at these investments and the way they're distributed between fund balance and recurring makes sense because we are asking for recurring funds for positions that have recurring costs. As far as spending down the fund balance, I'm looking to the administration to come up with ideas. I believe the superintendent mentioned at the work session that the full number was around 129 million a year. So I would suggest that if we think that the revenues are up in the county, we think they have more room because they put more houses on the tax rolls, the economy's improving, that we just continue to add positions toward the goals that you told us we needed, and use, make and add to the request that way. I did, in speaking to the CFO in terms of spending down fund balance, I agreed with them that there was no reason to rush to come up with the ideas, but I want their best thinking, and that could be done later in the year where we take an amendment to the budget to the county commission. So I have never asked that we make rash decisions about spending any money, but I do think that where we continue to have needs in behavioral specialists, in counselors, in education assistants, for us not to make an attempt to get toward that $129 million more a year that we need, I don't understand what the concern is. We are here to advocate for the best interests of our students. And if we don't ask for the money they need, then we are, in my opinion, not advocating in the best interests of our students.
Ms. Love?
Thank you. So I have a question, because I know that we go, I'm sorry, I know that we go through this, well, since I've been on the board every year. Is there a way to begin the budget process earlier? So the administration can give us what they feel the needs are, and we'll have more time to actually go through and identify as a board what the needs are.
So absolutely, Board Member Love, and I think this year we has forced me as the CFO to really rethink how we should do the budgeting process. I think there's been a lot of great things that have been new in terms of the board community sessions, as well as really thinking about the timeline. We actually get started, believe it or not, August 1st. So I'm literally sitting in my room August 1st, mapping out what the work plan is. We're doing forecasts, trying to see, and just keep in mind that's changing target, because not always do we know what our enrollment is going to be. Not always do we know certain decisions are going to be made. So we don't always have the clarity at the beginning, but I do think what we do have the clarity on is starting to reach out to students and teachers and principals and folks and really start engaging them earlier. And I remember my first meetings and my team first meetings started in October, where we began to talk with parents and we began to talk to students and teachers as well. But we can do, there's always room for improvement, and just taking some moment to reflect, I do think we can improve on that.
And that's what I was speaking of, because I'm fully aware when you guys start the process. I know that when we go to the county and we ask for the 12 million or whatever it is, I also know that there's another bucket that you would like to have, but it's not included in this year's budget. So taking that bucket and prioritizing what's important earlier, so
Yep.
and make sure that our fellow board members are involved in the process, but you have to involve us in that process because you're the money man. And just making sure that we're all engaged earlier, to make sure that our voices are heard and to make sure your voice is heard, so it doesn't feel like we're doing things at the last minute.
So
I agree 100%.
And I would say too, Ms. Love, just so I guess part of the challenge, I guess we need to get smart about how the board wants to engage. Because I do want to say that, like, we had a draft of this in February and had all those lists of needs, and I think we had a series of meetings. I think Mr. Caldwell had 4 or 5 different meetings. And so, I mean, I don't want the board to feel like we just popped up with this last week, right? Yeah, so I mean, so the question, I guess, is knowing that there's a 2 or 3 month, because we actually initially wanted to try to present this in April so that we have time to have the county, because there's still some back and forth, like we present and they tell us what to do and you guys approve and all that. So we just need to be just more, I guess, clear on just how the board, we can engage the board better so you guys have the information earlier so you can make the best decision.
Ms. Bibbs?
Thank you, Chair. Superintendent actually kind of just made the and Chief Johnson kind of just making the statement that I was going to say around. I think they did a great job of the timeline that we used this year, and I think even with Mr. Caldwell and how he made it a point to have us as a board engaged more often through the process. I think all of those were great wins for this go round. I think maybe there just need to be some fine tuning around what pieces of it were useful and what pieces of it we could probably adjust as we move forward. But I did want to just commend staff and superintendent on just following that timeline, because starting earlier, and even I know as some of us who were able to make most of the original meetings that Mr. Caldwell held about what we thought about investments were very helpful this go round. So I think it's kind of a evolving target as we move forward. But I do want to just put it out there around just staff did a great job this go round around what that timeline looked like, and it was very helpful.
Mr. Woods?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I want to just restate the obvious. Mr. Caldwell's point on advocating for the district, that's what we're charged to do. I couldn't agree more. My challenge is, a week ago, the administration brought to this body the need for textbooks. And I restate what I indicated to our CFO as well as Superintendent Hobson. With that recommendation should have been a plan on how we were going to pay for it. Either unequivocally, we've found savings in this year's budget, and we're planning to ask with your approval, we will be making the ask, or we have no funding for this, and we're going to be asking you to help advocate for an additional $6 million. It shouldn't be this body up here debating the obvious. We all know we need new textbooks, and so I'm not even going to go there to pit the debate on should we ask for $6 million or should we not. I expect the administration to look at those numbers and determine whether or not this should be funding spent out of this year's budget, or if we should be advocating for an additional $6 million. It's really not rocket science there. It's just, of course, if we know there's no shortage of needs in this district, but we do know that there's limited bandwidth in which the county commission is willing to fund. And to Caldwell's point, if it's asking for more and they counter, so be it. But if we have the funding and you have a plan to pay for it out of this year's budget, then present us with that option as well. That's
So
my point.
I think our recommendation is to go to the county commission for the $12.7 million. That's the funding gap that we as the administration is requesting. As far as the textbooks, what we, and I expressed this at the work session, is that there's a period, we need to first close our books to see where we end. So there is a period of time that we have from June 30th to August 30th, or July 1st to August 30th, where if we came a little bit under what we expected, that we can reassign fund balance or that overage towards the textbooks. So my advice as the CFO would be to allow us to first close our books, see where we're going to end the year, and for the science textbooks right now. That would be my recommendation.
I just want to make a few comments that I know board members have kind of weighed in on a few of these things. I do want to point out also the obvious, and that we have made several presentations throughout this community that the ask we would be making to the county commission was $12.7 million. And so at this point, I would recommend that the district comes back with another recommendation for how we would purchase those textbooks. If we have gone before our listening audience for the last 3 months, we've done community meetings in Midtown, from Whitehaven to Germantown, and we've talked through this ask and talked about the investments with the community, and then tomorrow morning we go and ask for something different. Those two things do not jive well for me. That's just me in my personal opinion. We've made presentations that the ask was $12.7 million to the county commission. And I agree with Mr. Woods that the administration should come back with a plan if it's anything different than that. We've worked very hard to have a pretty smooth budget process. And a week before the budget presentation to the county commission, I don't think is appropriate for us to go back and say, oh, well, my bad.
Absolutely. We can bring you several options in terms of how to fund the textbooks, and I agree with your sentiments.
The other is that, for this dilemma to have come up a week before the budget presentations, I would charge Mr. Woods and Ms. Love that this obviously is something that needs to be a part of our legislative agenda. We cannot be, back and forth with the state around when textbook adoptions happen, when we need to purchase textbooks. None of these things align with how we have to do business as a $1.4 billion organization. And it is unfair for the state to put these kind of pressures on us as a district and to the families that we're serving. So I would ask that they go back to the as part of this legislative agenda. That should be part of this concern, but not us going before the county commission tomorrow and making something up that we presented to this community. what we said investments needed to be. I'm going to ask for a vote on item 12.2. 1,054,423,509. Can I get a roll call vote?
Board Member Caldwell.
I pass.
Board Member Orville. Aye. Board Member Woods.
Aye.
Board Member Love. Board Member McCormick. Aye. Board Member Jones. Board Member Bibbs. Aye. Board Member Cornell.
Aye.
Board Chair Avant.
Aye.
Board Member Caldwell.
So it'll be a unanimous, I vote yes.
That
You have-
motion passes. Moving on to 12.3. Do you all have the answers to 12.1 that we could go back to that item?
I have most of the responses for the questions that were asked. So this procurement action was actually an IFB, invitation for bid, so it was based on lowest price. And so the vendors were selected based on the lowest cost that was provided to the district. We can provide for you tomorrow morning the actual breakdown and proposals for the vendors and the abstracts that shows how the prices were accumulated, and then how the department actually broke down which vendors got which amount.
How much was awarded to each vendor? That was my initial question.
Based on, I can give you approximate amounts. One vendor, Cyber Technology, was awarded approximately $150,000. ADI was awarded, Honeywell was awarded approximately $200,000. System Integrations was awarded $465,837.96.
Ms. Allen, is there a reason why we no longer see the grid of which vendors and the price points and how the rubric and how this was decided? Because that wasn't a part of it wasn't uploaded to the. Is there a reason why that process changed?
That was not a document that I was aware that was being presented, but we'll make sure that that's always presented. The abstract that shows the total cost of each vendor that respond, I was not aware that that was part of the documents.
Mr. Orwell?
I've been looking at that for I got a pin tonight.
You did.
5+ years of service. And I've been looking at that for a few years, and only recently have I noticed that we don't get that. So I move that we table this item until we get the information.
You moved to.
That's what I meant. I hadn't been chair in a while.
You moved to postpone the item. I second that. Oh, I can't. Okay. I second that. Ms. Jones? And we're specifically speaking on.
So I agree with the tabling, but when they come back.
I was only postponing.
Postponing it, but I had some other information I wanted to discuss.
Could you go ahead and make those?
So when she said that this was based on price, I want an explanation from the district as to, because of.
You know what, I'll withdraw my motion so she can ask the question. I'll withdraw my motion. You try to say.
So we've had numerous conversations, and I know we're in the process of building our program. And so I want an explanation as why the decision was made to do price as the determining factor and not include an RFP that would address the issues that this board continues to stress that it wants to see in procurement matters. So when we come back, I want an explanation other than the cost. We've had that discussion. I thought we made it clear, and now I see we're back to cost. So I want an explanation when you bring that back.
Mr. Woods?
My question is, can we get an update also on where we are with policy now that the disparity study's been done? Not necessarily, I know on facility matters, there's state law that dictate how we have to do you know, the procurement of that, those services. But I am interested in, because I have the floor, where are we on the policy updates regarding changes related to local and minority participation?
So we are in the final stages of developing, finish the drafting for the policies and procedures and the procurement manual that we're going to present on June 19th at the procurement committee procurement meeting.
Okay, and so is that the date in which you'll be presenting a policy to us to vet and to ultimately approve?
Yes.
All right, thank you.
Mr. Orgel? To the next business meeting? Okay. I second that motion. Can we get a roll call? Ms. Jones, you had no other comments? Okay. I do want to just add about this postponement. I do think, as Mr. Orgel has said, my question was when the process changed, because board members like to have as much transparency as possible when making these decisions. And so for us not to see how much was awarded to any of the vendors listed in this particular item, for us to have no explanation about how those decisions were made and what those price points were, when we have been very clear as a board that we want to continue to increase the minority and women business owners within this district, I just ask that staff go back and do its due diligence. So I'm going to ask for a roll call vote.
And I'm also going to direct that those scoring shots, like I don't know why the scoring sheets now all of a sudden will not be there. I mean, so that's, we hear from the board loud, I'm also directing that. I mean, because I think that folks are right. I mean, for a long time we had it all laid out, and so I don't know why it led to the decision not do that, but that just has to be there.
Well, typically for an IFB, it's based on price, so it's not a scoring that we typically do. And I was just also told that they've never provided that documentation, but I mean, we will start providing it in the past, invitation for bids.
I think that what's clear, and we talk about this, and the board has talked about this, is very important to the board, I think to me, just to the district, to significantly increase minority participation. So whatever needs to happen, I think that the board is, you know, authorizing and directing that we get smarter about the way that we do things. So unless there's, I think to Ms. Jones's point, unless there's a requirement that it has to be priced, why would we not conduct ourselves in a way that gives everybody an opportunity? So we just need to make sure that moving forward, we're thoughtful about that in everything that we procure. It's a question that the board is going to ask every time we come in here. It's a question that we ask in our meetings on Monday. So, you know, we got to figure this out.
It's a roll call vote. You got another point? Mr. Orgel.
About postponement.
Mr. Orgel.
So on the postponement, it really is justified, fellow board members, because I don't understand the exchange you just had, Mr. Hobson, with staff. But I just went back and looked at Riverview's, the roofing contract, and 4 responses, MWB response, who they were, and then it looks like we awarded it to an MWB firm, but they're not using the same name, but maybe so. I don't know how it was done, but anyway, it's plainly written out, and I've gotten used to seeing that. If we're buying toothpaste, or if we're buying potatoes, it's plainly listed out, and I think we do all that, Ms. Phelan, on price. Is that correct? There's no other factors. They didn't like what color your trucks are or stuff like that. It's a spec, it's price. So we can't pick and choose, Superintendent. I agree with you 100%, what's going to be priced and what's not going to be priced. So until we get that information, I support the postponement.
Ms. Anthony?
Board Member Caldwell.
Aye.
Board Member Orgel. Board Member Woods.
Aye.
Board Member Love.
Aye.
Board Member McCormick. Board Member Jones. Board Member Bibbs. Board Member Cornell.
Aye.
Board Chair Avant.
Aye.
You have 9 ayes.
That motion passes. This item will be postponed until the next board meeting or special called if so needed. We'll move to item 12.3 FY 2018-19 capital projects request in the amount of $90,292,947.
Motion to approve.
A second by Ms. Bibbs, sorry, motion by Mr. Woods, a second by Ms. Bibbs. Entertain questions? Mr. Johnson?
I just wanted to point out one minor change to this amendment. It's still, excuse me, the total amount is still $90.3 million. We noticed that Cummings were listed twice on a previous list. It actually should have been Cummings once, and then Douglas K8 listed. And I just wanted to point that out.
Seeing no lights, roll call vote.
Board Member Caldwell.
Aye.
Board Member Oral.
Aye.
Board Member Woods.
Aye.
Board Member Love.
Aye.
Board Member McCormick. Board Member Jones. Board Member Bibbs. Board Member Cornell.
Aye.
Board Chair Avent.
Aye.
You have 9 ayes.
That motion passes. Moving on to 12.4 Head Start cost of living adjustment in the amount of $619,951.
Motion to approve.
Motion by Mr. Woods, second by Ms. Love. Thank you. Seeing no lights, roll call vote.
Board Member Caldwell.
Aye.
Board Member Oral. Board Member Woods.
Aye.
Board Member Love.
Aye.
Board Member McCormick. Board Member Jones. Board Member Bibbs. Board Member Cornell.
Aye.
Board Chair Avent.
Aye.
You have 9 ayes.
That motion passes. Now we move to 12.5, the resolutions approving the SCS Board Strategic School Fund allocations. I'm going to read out those amounts quickly. Under Vice Chair Love, I am not reading out amounts that were called out last week. We've already read those into the record. This will be just any additional adjustments that have been made. Lucy E. Campbell, $5,000 for summer recruitment. North Haven Elementary, summer recruitment, $5,000. Craigmont High, $7,000 for the planetarium. Egypt Elementary Athletics Department, $5,000 for a total of $27,000. Scott McCormick, Craigmont High, $5,270 for the planetarium. Board Member Jones, Kingsbury High School, library furniture, $35,670. Board Member Cornell, Melrose High School marquee, $15,000. Overton High School marquee, $15,000. Woodell High School marquee, $15,000. Sharp Elementary School performing arts, replacement of stolen items, $12,500. Craigmont High School planetarium, $2,500. Middle College High School, $3,757 for a total of $65,000. Board Member Bibbs, District 7 Leadership Recognition, $2,000. Oak Haven Middle School Restorative Justice Program, $250. Middle College High School Athletics Department, $8,965 for a total of $11,215. Board Member Caldwell, West Side Elementary, backpacks and uniforms, $4,985. So that doesn't add up if the total is $5,485. I'm sorry, so that wasn't read into record last week, the 500 for Peabody? Okay, so let me make a clarification for Board Member Caldwell. Peabody Elementary School, 500, Westside Elementary School, 4,985 for a total of 5,485. Is that correct, Board Member Caldwell? They highlighted the additional, so that's what I was just reading out, because some of those things were called out last week. Okay. Board Member Orgel, Shelby Oaks Elementary School, water fountain, $6,000. Germantown High School, refurbishing and purchase of football helmets, $12,000 for a total of $18,000. Can I get a? We already got a motion, right? A motion, Bibbs, and second, Love. Can I get a roll call? Ms. Jones, did you have a?
Madam Chair, I wanted to thank all of my fellow board members who were so generous with their donations toward the Craigmont Planetarium. I hope that we'll have a opportunity to have a formal event once the planetarium is restored. And I know that you had items in your district that you could have used these funds for, and I just want to thank you for assisting with my request. So I do appreciate it.
Job well done and getting your money, Miss Jones. Well done. Mr. Cornell.
Board Member Jones, when we think of the stars in the sky, we think of you.
Oh. Roll call vote.
Board Member Caldwell.
Aye.
Board Member Orwell. Board Member Woods.
Aye.
Board Member Love.
Aye.
Board Member McCormick. Board Member Jones. Board Member Bibbs. Board Member Cornell.
Aye.
Board Chair Avant.
Aye.
You have 9 ayes.
That motion passes. Board members, if you do have any additional funds, I think your time is really running out.
I will take them.
And I think Miss Jones would also, still take dollars that she's needing for the planetarium. So let's move on to 12.6, resolution recognizing the donation of $1,755 shares of Archer Daniel Midland Common Stock to Shelby County School District. Mr. Caldwell, would you like to read the resolution into record?
Sure, and I have it submitted by me, but I didn't want to be presumptuous, but certainly every board member is welcome to add their names to the list, and this is going to go to the gentleman that donated stock. Resolution recognizing the donation of 1,755 shares of Archer Daniel Midland Common Stock to the Shelby County School District and honoring the longtime Memphis residents' generous gift to support the efforts of SCS to provide a quality public education to all public school students of Shelby County. Whereas the Shelby County Board of Education has been established by Tennessee state law as the local educational authority of Shelby County, responsible for providing a free and quality public education to all citizens of our county who desire one. Whereas our district needs the public support of all stakeholders to be successful in fulfilling our charge to educate students properly. And whereas adequate financial resources are critical to the board and the administration's ability to successfully fulfill our statutory obligations. And now therefore be it resolved that the Shelby County Board of Education recognizes and greatly appreciate this supporter's donation and honors him for his important exemplary support of public education in our community and his unselfish commitment to public education. Submitted by Christy Caldwell, board member, on the 28th of May.
Second.
Board Member Caldwell, I would dutifully like to add my name to this resolution if there are other board members that would like to do the same. Thank you. Okay. We'd love to accept this generous donation. So we'll make those changes to the resolution, that all the names will be added to the resolution. Yes, I'm sure he would. Yes. Okay, can I get a roll call vote?
Board Member Caldwell.
I hope that means we're going to pass the next two resolutions, or this one doesn't mean it.
Board Member Orgel. Board Member Woods.
Aye.
Board Member Love.
Aye.
Board Member McCormick. Board Member Jones. Board Member Bibbs. Board Member Cornell.
Aye.
Board Chair Avant.
Aye.
You have 8 ayes.
That motion passes. I'm going to recommend that we combine 12.7 and 12.8, which is acceptance of the donation of stock of 1,755 shares, and then also a resolution to liquidate that stock.
Motion to approve.
A motion and a second for the approval and liquidation of those 1,755 shares. Can I get a roll call vote?
Board Member Caldwell.
Aye.
Board Member Woods.
Aye.
Board Member Love.
Aye.
Board Member McCormick. Board Member Jones. Board Member Bibbs. Board Member Cornell.
Aye.
Board Chair Avant.
Aye.
You have 8 ayes.
That motion passes. We're gonna move on to 12.10. 12.9 was actually already done earlier. 12.10 is milk and refrigerated juice items for the 2017-2018 school year in the amount of $827,040.30. Can I get a motion? And then we can.
Motion to approve.
Second.
And a motion and a second. Was this your item, Mr. Cornell? No? Oh, you added, okay. Well, he always has a question about fruit and produce. I'm sorry. No, my apologies. This item was added. Ms. Superintendent, if there are no questions, we're gonna take a roll call vote. I'm sorry, I thought it was you. Roll call.
Board Member Caldwell.
Aye.
Board Member Woods.
Aye.
Board Member Love. Board Member McCormick. Board Member Jones. Board Member Bibbs. Board Member Cornell.
Aye.
Board Chair Avant.
Aye.
You have 8 ayes.
That motion passes. 12.12, Youth Violence Intervention Initiative. Ms. Love?
So, Chair, with the approval of my fellow board members, I'm going to ask that this be moved into next month. There are still some questions that I have dealing with accountability measures, dealing with the current data, and dealing with principals' input involving these programs. And this is not saying that I am not in agreement that we need extra support for our children. What I'm saying is I know that we have so many other programs, and as a board member, I would like to know what's already working before we implement more programs. And I do believe that we need a accountability measure or data card in place for not just these particular vendors, but for all of our vendors, to make sure that we're actually holding them accountable for the needs of our children.
So if we could get a motion to adopt, and then we could have, if there's an amendment to that, we can do so. A motion, then you can make a motion to postpone. Yes, yes.
And I'll just say, board members, I'll just say, board members, yeah, I'm talk to Ms. Love. I mean, I think that they know they're working through the accountability measures. It may make some sense to just roll this to a committee and then bring it back in June. We're fine with that.
Without objection, if we could remove 12.12.
No objection.
Seeing no objections, we're gonna remove this item.
Can I say something, Chair? Ava?
Yes.
So I do know that we do not have anything on our June calendar for the June business meeting. So even what I would like to suggest is that we add this to the community engagement meeting for June the 26th at 4 p.m. since we don't have anything on there. If your calendar is good, and board members, so be looking for that calendar invite. It will be sent out tomorrow. Thank you.
Okay. Moving on to 13.1, donation to Downtown Elementary School in the amount of $27,000. Superintendent.
That's exactly what it's for. Can somebody tell me where?
The donation was from whom?
The board office was told that it was from a charitable trust.
Speak up, Ms. Jones.
I think last week there was some information given. Is this the one where initially they wanted to be anonymous and then they changed their mind? I'm not sure, but
No,
That was
this
something else?
this is not this is
Oh.
not it. That was just the,
I'm
the
wrong.
stocks.
Okay. So, Superintendent, I'm gonna ask, without us having further information, that this item be moved
Sure.
to, if there's, without objection from the board, that this item is moved to next month's agenda once more information is provided. Seeing no objections, 13.1 has been removed. 13.2 is a Gear Up Tennessee grant in the amount of $881,403. This is from the Department, Tennessee Higher Education Commission.
Ms. Johnson.
So yes, this is the Gear Up grant for Kingsbury High School. Just to give you some idea about this grant, it's a 6-year grant. We're gonna receive the first installment for the first part of this year, and then subsequent years we'll receive about $144,000. This grant is designed to provide support to students to be academic prepared for college, and this includes the 8th grade students who are coming from Kingsbury Middle and Treswood Middle as well. And these students will receive individualized support and advocacy to complete their 12K education along with their post-secondary applications as well. This comes with a facilitator, school supplies, college readiness activities that include college field trips, and also making our parents aware of educational opportunities as well.
Can I get a,
And this amount is for the full, that 881,000 is for the full 6 years.
can I get a motion? Motion by Ms. Love. Second by Ms. Jones. Seeing no lights, can I get a roll call vote?
Board Member Caldwell.
Aye.
Board Member Love.
Aye.
Board Member McCormick. Board Member Jones. Board Member Bibbs. Board Member Cornell.
Aye.
Board Chair Avant.
Aye.
You have 7 ayes.
That motion passes. 13.3, Cherokee Elementary School National Champion School Grant in the amount of $100,000.
Yeah, this is from the National Foundation for Governor's Fitness Council. It's a competitive grant. It's actually for $100,000 worth of fitness equipment.
Yep. Can I get a motion?
Principal.
Moved by Mr. McCormick, second by Ms. Bibbs. Seeing no lights, can I get a roll call vote?
Board Member Caldwell.
Aye.
Board Member Love.
Aye.
Board Member McCormick. Board Member Jones. Board Member Bibbs. Board Member Cornell.
Aye.
Board Chair Avant.
Aye.
You have 7 ayes.
That motion passes. Seeing no other items before us, this meeting is adjourned.
Chief, see you later. All right. Okay, come on, let's go.